Special trivia tonight, all about DC statehood, because a vote for DC statehood is coming to the floor soon. As we all know, since we came to this trivia, DC does not have a voting representative in the House, even though Vermont and Wyoming have less people than the District of Columbia. I believe Eleanor Holmes Norton is going to join us soon.
Back in February 2020, DC delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton celebrated a coming milestone House vote on whether to make DC the 51st state.
My good friend Steny Hoyer tells me that this bill to make the District of Columbia the 51st state will be on the floor before this summer.
COVID-19.
Since coronavirus first arrived in the U.S.
District of Columbia.
The district stands to receive about $500 million as opposed to states which are guaranteed at least $1.25 billion.
The issue is unprecedented. It is funding DC at less than the per capita statehood funding that we're accustomed to.
In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, Congress approved a bill in late March that would give DC significantly less emergency funding than any other state. They would be poised to receive millions more in funding if Holmes Norton got her wish and DC were a state.
This is why you see me pressing so hard for statehood for the District of Columbia.
But let's back up. Where does DC statehood stand in the first place?
Today is an historic day for our country and our democracy. For the first time in a generation, we will vote on whether hundreds of thousands of American citizens will finally have their voices counted in Congress.
I had no sooner gotten to Congress than I introduced and got a statehood bill all the way to the floor of the House of Representatives.
H.R. 51 may be unusual. It is surely unprecedented. But, my colleagues, it is not unconstitutional.
I was determined that in my very first term was not too early to try to get statehood.
The yeas are 153, the nays are 277, and the bill is not passed.
I've always thought that a blot on our democracy was the fact that the residents of the District of Columbia did not have a vote in the Congress of the United States, but was reluctant to support statehood because I thought that would be a much more difficult task. I've come to conclude that the only way to do fairness to our democracy is to grant them statehood.
America's the only democratic nation on earth that disenfranchises the people in the capital city. Can you imagine if the people in Paris, France were disenfranchised in the National Assembly? You would have another French Revolution on your hands.
Statehood has strong support in the Democrat-controlled House, but Republicans are opposed.
Founders intentionally crafted the Constitution so the seat of the federal government would purposefully and specifically not be within any state.
This has, to me, nothing to do with party politics. My oath is to those documents that hang on the wall next to you. May I say that our Constitution is clear. If you want to form a 51st state, then knock yourself out. Follow the constitutionally mandated process to make that happen. This would call for an amendment to our Constitution as ratified by a sufficient number of the several states.
You can't legislate a state in existence. It just makes no sense. It's a force play that we called out, and rightfully so.
The Constitution says the seat of government must be outside of any state, which Democrats say doesn't conflict with their bill.
As Jay Madison articulated in Federalist Number 43, if the capital city was situated within a state, the federal government would be subject to undue influence by that host state.
True. The capital has to be separate. That's why we've carved out the land that the entire world associates with the capital, most of it around the mall area. No one can have any jurisdiction over that, but the neighborhoods, the rest of the district, of course, becomes the new state.
We're here today to say the time for statehood for Washington, D.C. is now. We want everybody across these United States of America to know that we are just like them. We pay taxes just like they do. We send our people to war just like they do. And they demand statehood now.
Statehood would give D.C. a voting member of Congress and 2 senators, and a heavily Democratic district would almost certainly elect Democrats, like Holmes Norton.
To make the District of Columbia a state, that'd give them 2 new Democratic senators. So this is full bore socialism.
Statehood faces almost certain failure in the Republican-controlled Senate.
It'll die. They're not going to pass that. If it gets to the president, guess what? He's going to veto that.
Some Republicans have signaled support for enfranchising D.C. residents, but are still unlikely to back statehood.
I have no cause against my fellow citizens that seek statehood, but that my oath is to the Constitution.
Should D.C. become a state? Should it not have to pay taxes?
I like to do whatever is good for the District of Columbia because I love the people. You know, it's funny. I've really gotten to know the people.
If the land is to be used for any other purpose other than the continuance of our nation's capital, which was the original agreement, then the land should be returned to the people of Maryland.
I tell you, I don't live in fear of that issue.
The District of Columbia don't want to be Marylanders. They don't want to be Virginians. They are members of the District of Columbia. They're citizens of the District of Columbia, their own entity.
So what would the 51st state be called?
We didn't want to change much about ourselves. So it's Washington, D.C., and it's Washington Douglas Commonwealth.
Of course, Frederick Douglass, who sits over my shoulder here.
Our earliest advocate for equality. Here's a man, more than 200 years ago, even then, could not abide the inequality between the residents who lived in the District of Columbia and everybody else.
I don't think they can forecast the future as much as they could before. He was going to bring it to the floor before the August recess. I would hope that by August, we will be back in the Congress of the United States, in the House and the Senate.
Here's the 51st state flag, and I defy you to tell the difference, but it'll be a big difference when the district is the 51st state in point of fact. If you look at it, you won't see much difference. I think I like that, even as I extol and look forward to having that extra star in the flag. People are going to have to buy new flags, so get ready.